Hi everyone, this is Rob, your instructor. The purpose of this video is just to provide you with some infrastructural information regarding the course. I'll try as best as possible to keep any content-related material within the discussion boards so that you don't have too much additional reading and listening to do on top of what you're already doing within the textbook and within the discussions and assignments. So there are 5 things that I want to chat with you briefly about today. The first are some resource links. The second are deadlines. Third, extensions. Fourth, the discussions, grading rubric. And finally, the grading rubric for the projects, the main projects, the major assignments that you'll be completing. Regarding some resources, I've added today this module here on the Canvas homepage under resources. There are just a few things here that you may find useful depending on your needs throughout the course. The first is a link to the library resources page. These open within Canvas, obviously. You can open them outside of it. And there are just a few resources and some pertinent contact information. And these are materials that the library has put together to help support your work in this course. The second item is the Writing Center at Penn State Learning. Since this is a Web University Park course, you do have access to Writing Center resources, and you can see the summer session hours here. There's some amount of some amount of walk-in appointments available and in-person tutoring, and they'll also do online appointments as well. If you're in the State College area, I'd highly encourage you to meet with folks there in person. And outside of this, in addition to Penn State Learning, if you'd like to have a synchronous Zoom chat with me about your writing, at my discretion, and I can do that, just email me your availability. My own availability is typically limited to Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So just be aware of that, and if I can accommodate you and meet with you, I will. Finally, the English for Professional Purposes Intercultural Center is a resource for particularly if you're coming from a language base outside of English, if English is a second language to you. English for Professional Purposes Intercultural Center is meant to support you in language skills and professional development sort of work. So that might be a useful resource for you as well. In terms of deadlines, now I'm going to go over to the syllabus portion. Please, if you haven't already, read this in depth. I'm just going to skip here to the particular things that I want to highlight regarding deadlines. Unless otherwise noted, the work you do in this class must be submitted by 11:59 Eastern Time on the due date. The late policy that is automatically applied here is that after that date and time for each assignment, Canvas will begin deducting percentage points from the submission's final grade. This is approximately 10% per 24-hour day. It's prorated to 0.4% per hour, which sounds a little inane, but that's mostly so that if you hand in something at like 12:01 a.m. that you're not docked the full 10%. That's why I do this. And in any event, it really does encourage you to get your work in as soon as possible. The other things to note here, 2 incentives for you to complete your work, even if it's very late. You must hand in all major projects to pass the course. If you do not hand in any of the major projects, one or more of the major projects, by the time the course is completed, you will fail the course. However, you should also note that late penalties will not drop an assignment grade below 59.99%. So if you're late 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, as long as you submit the thing, your grade's not going to drop lower than this. So that is also meant to incentivize you to complete and submit your work. This applies to discussion posts as well. So even if we're well past something, if you find yourself in a position where you're trying to scrape every last point out of the course, you can still earn some amount of credit. What I tell students is 59.99 isn't a lot, but it's a lot more than 0. So that can be of value to you. You can use 2 3-day extensions for any major projects. That is the final version of a project except for the last one. And so the nomenclature I've used here is that you can use those extensions for any assignments titled final project, insert number here, project, insert number here, final Dropbox. And you can do this for any such project except for the last one. The final grade deadlines are so tight that I cannot make any extensions on the last project. You don't need to explain to me why you need the extensions. This 2 free 3-day extensions is my accommodation to you, with the assumption that all sorts of circumstances might occur outside of the course that might preclude you from doing your best work on it. Now, the thing is, you need to remember that these extensions are for the final versions of major projects only. Students will most often want to use these for the first draft of the project, which kind of makes sense because that's the first thing that's due. You're starting from not a lot of material already, and you might find yourself under the gun. However, it cannot be applied to early drafts. And this is because, one, the administrative burden of managing extensions across all of the possible assignments for the course is a lot, and that's more than I'm willing to do. But also because the discussions in the workshops can only work if the overwhelming majority of students are submitting work on time. And what I have found is that if the extension policy is extended to things like first drafts or workshops, there's a high likelihood that we'll miss a large number of class students from having submitted those things on time, especially the rough drafts. And then the peer review process all falls apart because there aren't enough drafts for people to review, and it all goes downhill from there. So again, you can use 2 3 free-day extensions for any project except for the last one. You just need to let me know that you'd like to use it. I will not automatically apply these for you. And finally, the intensive nature of this course, a lot's crammed into 6 weeks. That precludes me from being any more flexible on this policy than what's here. So if you want to use any of these for any project, you just need to email me. I will log that and I will let you know that I've adjusted that due date for you in Canvas. Moving on, the discussions grading rubric is worth mentioning. The class discussions and writing workshops, I want you to do as good a job on these as you can do. But I am not assessing them on the quality of the work that you are completing. I'm just assessing whether or not you did them at the barest bones level. So accordingly, my grading for that breaks down into this rubric here under discussion and workshop grades. An A version of this is where you have completed the original post, whether that be a post in a discussion or submitted the original draft, and you have completed all of the replies that are required of you. In a C version, you've submitted the original post, but you haven't submitted one or both of the replies required. And then in a D version, you haven't submitted the original post at all, but you've completed one or more replies. A distinction to be aware of here is that in, I think, most, if not all of the cases, the discussions require for you to complete an original post and reply to 2 other posts. The writing workshops require you to complete an original post that includes your draft and reply to 1 other writer. And I think the reason for that is a greater amount of depth is expected when you are applying to a peer's work. So that is of more value than completing multiple responses. And again, that's for the writing workshops. There are 2 qualifiers to this simplistic completion-based rubric. Work that is especially careless or insubstantial, that is, the original posts are exceedingly brief, there are excessive spelling or grammar errors, peer review feedback is very generic. Those can earn grades lower than an A, regardless of whether you've completed the original post and all replies. I don't imagine that I would use this often, but basically, if it looks like you are not putting much care at all into your work, I reserve the right to record a grade lower than A, all the way down to a D or an F, if I see this, particularly if I see this as a trend in the work you're doing in the course. Finally, work that could be mistaken for the unedited product of a generative artificial intelligence program such as ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot will earn an F. Multiple instances of this may result in an allegation of academic misconduct. Especially in the case of the class discussions, the intellectual work that's being asked of you is not excessively onerous or difficult, such that if there are the typical signs to me that you've probably used generative AI to complete that post, I'll liberally record an F for your work on that. And if I see it as a repeated occurrence, then I might file an allegation of academic misconduct for that work that you've submitted. If I record an F for this and describe it as appears to be the unedited product of a generative artificial intelligence program, and you wish to contest that, you can message me and say, hey, this is my original work and here's why. And I might go back and forth with you or try to chat with you on Zoom synchronously so we could talk it out. But again, the burden of proof here is that if it could be mistaken for the unedited edited product of generative artificial AI. So just do your own work and avoid any chances that your work could be misinterpreted as using one of those tools. There isn't otherwise a way that I have faith in that I could mechanistically prohibit you from using those tools. So this is just my line on it. That's something that I feel like is reasonably enforceable and reasonable. Finally, grading rubric walkthrough. I'm going to take us now over to the main page, and I'll take us over to the first project description so you can see what I'm talking about. My approach to grades is that the gold standard for evaluating student work is to meet and discuss the work with the student, talk about what's going poorly, talk about what is going really well. But it's an asynchronous course, and that can be an onerous thing. You probably have other things to do. So I consider letter grades as a basic method of communicating this information to you. This recording is a walkthrough of the grading rubric that I typically use for my courses. This, if your grading rubric doesn't look exactly like this one, or if it has more examples on it, don't worry about that. It might be because you're using a different course, or I'm using at that point a different rubric than this one, but the fundamentals of it are the same. So first of all, when I complete my assessment of your work, after I complete this rubric, I'll write some written comments here in this box on the top, and I will usually paste that as a comment into the learning management system. So the reason why I do that is so that if you don't even open this rubric file, you'll at least have what I think of as the most important takeaway from my for you to think about as you work on subsequent writing projects. If possible, I'll also attach this completed rubric file as a comment as well. So you can download this file from the assignment page for the project and open it in Microsoft Excel if you want to take a look at it and see how it works. What I've done here is that I've written down each of the primary criteria that I'll be using to assess your assignment. And I have included examples of what different assignments on that criteria might look like across the grading scale. So in some rubrics, I might go all the way down A, B, C, D and put some descriptions of each of those. In this case, I'm just giving the goalposts, I guess you could say, of what a B submission looks like and what a D submission looks like. And I consider that sufficient for you to be able to infer what is in the middle here. What's better than D and less than B? What is better than B? Just consider that an A would be a better version of this, something that is outstanding beyond the criteria that's described here. And then this is where I would enter a letter grade for how you've done for the individual piece of the criteria. That'll produce a number value that is pulled from the grading scheme down here, which is consistent from the grading scheme for the course. That number value will then be weighted by a percentage value, and then a raw score will appear here. What I've done here is that where it indicates as weighting, I have indicated for that criteria item just how important I think that criteria is for the assignment. So then that number value will be weighted, appear in a raw score here, and that'll add up to a total. So just as an example of how this works, let's say I were, for this particular assignment, it is looking for addressing all of the characteristics of effective technical communication. That's just a particular criteria for this project. A good version of this shows an analysis that addresses all of these aspects and shows you've read the textbook, you know what you're talking about. As an example of what I might infer as an A version of this, or excellent, that would be you've done all this, but it shows something particularly insightful or innovative in your approach, or how you've understood that how you've understood that aspect. Something in your analysis is particularly well thought out, well detailed. That's the sort of thing that stands out as an A. In a D submission, which would be marginally acceptable, that would be quite simply if one or more of these characteristics are missing, or if it demonstrates that there's a key concept from the textbook that you just haven't understood. That's what a D would look like. For the sake of exemplifying how this rubric works, let's just say that the writer has done a good job with this. I'll enter a B here. And then I'm just going to fill in with some other evaluations here. And you can see how this adds up. Let's say that they've accumulated a range of different evaluations for each of these items, but maybe style and writing wise, they've done particularly well. You can see here what's happening here. It's pulling the number value from the grading scheme. That number value is being weighted according to the percentage, and it's producing a raw score here that produces for this student a B+. Say anything was slightly different here, like say this item here on interpretation that there's a judgment and an argument being made about the quality of a document, but it's particularly well executed. That might bump this up to say an A-. Or if some of these things got a bit worse, let's say that the writing quality was particularly poor, I might take it down to a B+ again. Let's say that it is particularly poorly organized somehow. Then you can see the grade drop a little bit further. So that is how I use this grading rubric. I find that this does tend to lead to what I think of as somewhat generous grades, admittedly, favoring the student, just because I'm very much a benefit of a doubt sort of grader. And if I'm looking at these criteria in my descriptions of it, and it seems like the student is mostly there, I will probably enter the B grade or whatever it is. And also, in most cases, I don't usually plus or minus these things. That can work, but I think that also gets to a level of granularity that I think might not be that helpful for communicating to you just how well I think that you're doing. So I don't do that. There might be some cases where I'm at a split enough decision where I feel like that would be helpful in order to either communicate that to you or to simply allow me to record a grade I'm happy with and move on. In those cases, I might do that, but that is not too frequent. Okay, so I hope this is helpful to you. You can play with this if you like. If I were you, I wouldn't get too hung up on trying to min-max each of these criteria items or game the system in terms of where you're putting forth your effort. I would say to do as exceptional a job you can on each of these items, and then see where the chips fall from there. But if you have any questions about this or how I evaluate your work, I encourage you to reach out to me, and I'm happy to respond to you or meet with you to help clarify these expectations. Thanks very much for your time.